The ISSA Cleaning Industry Management Standard, CIMS. Many may have heard of it, but many more are now mandating this certification to work in their facilities. The CIMS standard is the first consensus-based management standard that outlines the primary characteristics of a successful, quality-driven cleaning organization. Why? Because it is designed to assist organizations thoroughly understand their customers' service requirements and manage their organizations in a manner that is predicated on ensuring quality, efficiency, and overall customer satisfaction. Post-COVID, facility owners and managers are striving to ensure public health and safety in their buildings. As such, they are increasingly looking towards cleaning contractors who are CIMS certified to service their facilities. Today, we will look at the CIMS standard from the building service contractor perspective. Why CIMS was pursued, what has certification done for their businesses, and how these companies became stronger because of the certification. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for today's session, Ken Hilder. Ken is the chair of the ISSA Canada BSC Council and is a 30-plus year veteran of the industry, working in both manufacturing and distribution sectors for companies like Kimberly-Clark, Swish Maintenance, and ISO National Cleaning Solutions. Retiring in 2016, Ken has been instrumental in the formation of the ISSA Canada BSC Council, as well as providing strategic consultation to our association. I'm also pleased to introduce our guests today, Christina Worobec, Director of Health and Safety at Scandinavian Building Services, Yiannis Boutsalis, Vice President at Impact Cleaning Services, and Robert Scott, Executive Vice President at BClean. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Before we proceed, I just want to remind all of our guests today that if you do have questions, please include them in the chat, and we will address these all at the end of the session. And with that said, Ken, please take it away.
Thanks, Tanya. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. And I'd especially like to thank our three guests whose organizations are all CIMS certified. They've been through the process, and today we're going to explore with them what that process was like and a lot of information around CIMS, especially for organizations or some of you listeners out there that are perhaps thinking about or contemplating whether they should move towards CIMS. So I guess the best place to start is always at the beginning. And I'd like to pose the first question to our guests that kind of along the lines of, how did you first come to hear or learn about CIMS? What was your kind of early expectations or impressions about CIMS? And just before each of you start, maybe just state for our listeners how long your organization has actually been CIMS certified. So to begin, I'd like to start with Yanni, if you'd like to go ahead, Yanni.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on. So Impact Cleaning first got the CIMS designation in 2009, right at its infancy. It was a part of the City of Toronto contract that was being awarded and was actually being pushed forward from the City of Toronto as a requirement on successfully receiving business from them. So that came on board for us with the Toronto police stations. And in 2011, we actually expanded, so we were CIMS company-wide. So since 2011, everything we step into, we actually approach with the CIMS designation in mind and CIMS GB practices. So it doesn't just start from one single account. It's our whole philosophy. As well, I think it was really pushed forward through our operations at first. So at the time, one of our operations managers, now our senior director of operations, Lucy Reed, she was she was the one who was onboarding the account. She was the one who was very much our stakeholder at first in putting those in place across that first portfolio of buildings. It involved only, a handful of people at the time. Since it was a new designation, there was a lot of help from ISSA in terms of it to be the approach that needed to be taken, what needed to be put together, documentation, kind of the orientation of it. And then once we had done that in 2009, that took us a good couple of months. I think it was about 6 months after that award that we had gone through the process, put it together, got our first audits done. And then once that had happened, we really saw kind of what was being provided in terms of value, in terms of structure. So in 2011, we actually went through the process of doing it across, all our accounts. We had a kind of a mini committee inside our company, which was in 2011 was when I first started actually working full time at the business, and I was involved in helping do some of the admin work, some of the legwork, putting it all together. And I would say the 5 people who were kind of a part of that committee are still here at the company, and we've every 2 years we all sit down together, we review it, we fix it, we make new implementations, we make new strategic decisions, and we've been certified ever since. So going on 15 years now.
Thank you, Yanni. So, Christina, I'll ask you to go next. What year was Scandinavian certified?
Yeah, so Scandi started going through the process in 2016 and received their first certification in 2017. And initially,
how did you first learn about CIMS?
Yeah, initially it was a recommendation by our clients. So we soon realized that going through the certification was an opportunity to do a deep dive into our processes and policies, as well as our operations, recognizing our strengths and our areas for improvement. And we knew that going through CIMS would also be an opportunity to identify inconsistencies across the country. So initially CIMS, the certification was just achieved in Alberta. And then shortly after that, they pursued the certification across the country. So we wanted to look at whether each region was following the same or some different processes.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Rob, what year was BClean certified?
Yeah, thanks, Ken, and thanks to you and Tanya for setting up our coffee talk today. Nice to have the opportunity to connect with Christina and Yanni as well. Our BClean was first certified in 2007, and our awareness of the CIMS certification was driven by someone named Mark Andrews, who occupied the same role I now fulfill at BClean. So Mark and a number of our group attended the ISSA conferences quite avidly through that period, the sort of middle 2000s. So in 2006, they became aware that the ISSA was launching the standard and decided to have BClean pursue it. Similar to both Yanni and Christina, we subsequently have expanded it across the balance of the business from coast to coast. And I see, we've worked with a number of the auditors all across Canada. I see a couple of them on the call here today. So we've had the chance to apply the standard across the country as well over the last number of years.
Okay, thanks, Rob. So, thinking about this, it's been some time, Impact 2009, Scandinavian, more recently 2016, both kind of client driven by the sounds of it in terms of, how they came about to kind of consider going towards CIMS. BClean since 2007. So looking back, if we were to go back, I'll start with you, Christina, to 2016. I'd like you to share with our listeners, how that decision was made, who was involved at Scandinavian, how long approximately did it take you to come to the determination that you wanted to go for CIMS certification, and what were the expectations that you were looking to achieve, from CIMS certification once you got to that point?
Yeah, thank you. So we recognized that the goals of our organization were aligned with the CIMS standard. So we wanted, as an organization, to grow and diversify in the industry. And that meant that we had to take on the challenge. So as I mentioned, we first started in Alberta, moved across the country, and that allowed us to really have some insight into where our gaps were, our inconsistencies, and work towards closing that. It was a team effort for sure, but health and safety representatives as well as human resources. So at the time, it would have been our vice president of HR, which is Melanie Brooks. She's now our executive vice president and one of the owners of Scandinavian as well. So the team had spearheaded the certification, and there were representatives from each department, including operations, who were involved. And really all members of the Scandi family played a really important role. So in offering their expertise and industry experience, it took some time, so a few months for sure to get prepared in Alberta, and then about a year to get ready to certify across the country. So you had asked, what were our expectations? Well, we expected to invest some time to learn about the CIMS standard and then to really deep dive into our gaps, review our current policies and business processes. And we identified those areas for improvement and really worked to revise what we had currently. And we wanted to become more efficient that way. So ultimately, we really wanted to establish a safer work environment for our clients, customers, and our team members. So that safety culture piece was really important. We also wanted to become more consistent in following standardized processes across the country, and then become a better organization by educating and communicating better on company protocols.
Great. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
Yanni, I'm going to ask you to go next, and similar to Christina, talk about, who was involved at Impact, and how long did it take you to make that decision? And again, to finish off with, what were your expectations at that time, at the start of, making a decision to go towards CIMS certification?
Yeah. So what really kicked it off for us was getting introduced to it from like the client side. But what we saw when that was presented, it was fairly new at the time. There wasn't a lot of representation of it in Canada, and because of the contract we were taking on, a lot of health and safety requirements, much like Christina said, ensuring consistency, and the standard really gave you a template that was, measurable, definable, repeatable, right? And you got a lot of consistency across the board when you went through all the steps, that we looked at it as you have a number of clients, they all have a number of different requirements. And when we saw it, we said, this is one very, very comparable requirement that you can really kind of put across the board, and everyone would say the value in ensuring that you've checked all these boxes. So at the time when our operations team took it in, they all looked at it and said, we do a lot of these items in piecemeal here, piecemeal there. Someone asked for this item, someone asked for this, but the barrier to do it, to further it and do it across the company wasn't that difficult, especially when you saw kind of how to check the boxes. For us, it really made sense in saying, okay, if we take all our practices and we focus it on one certification here, and we really kind of evangelize, take it all together and say, this is something that we think is, above the expectations a lot of people have, it's worth putting our effort towards. And, the first 2 years of having it just at those few sites, I think it was about 38 sites, it really was showing dividends in terms of the consistency. Health and safety was a very big important factor there. So we were seeing a lot of the time we were very proactive with it. It was paying off for us to making sure everyone was safe and everything was good across the board. And it didn't take a lot of hands at first, just because it was only that small piece that we had our operations manager, we had our operations supervisor, we had our one of our vice president. And then we had, an admin here, an admin there, helping to pull it all together. So that team was very focused and able to really narrow it down and be specific with everything we're doing. But when we brought it to the company level, we involved every department with, a department lead that would bring together, from the finance side, what we needed, from the health and safety side, what we needed, from the operations, scope, what we needed. And from there would be one or two people involved to ensuring that there was, a committee. And we even brought it down to the cleaners level, right? Because when we were looking at what type of tools we use and what type of forms we were going to use to check these things off, we wanted to make sure it was as repeatable and accessible to everyone, where we weren't going to push something down from the top and say, make it work. We wanted to get that feedback as well. So it was a very big team kind of atmosphere putting it together. And every year it's the same thing. We bring in a few people from outside the main office to make sure that they're, the practices are easy to put in place, that we're trying to distill through the CIMS certification, that everything that we need to check off is, we can do it from top to bottom. And yeah, it's just been kind of snowballed from there.
Great. Thanks, Yanni. So, Rob, I'd like to ask you to talk to us from BClean's perspective. The same question, who was involved and how long did it take to make the decision to go towards CIMS? And at the end of that, when the decision was made, what were your expectations as you started to move forward?
Yeah, thanks. So I think early on, it was a pretty, much like Christina and Yanni have described, it was a pretty concise, pretty tight team of people that were involved. So again, I mentioned Mark Andrews, another named John Appleton. And over the years, the team has expanded significantly to really engage our health and safety team, a couple of whom are here on the call with us today. And they have really sort of led it over the last probably 10 years into a much broader scope across the entire country and a much more consistent scope. So for us, I think what the challenge we have seen historically in the industry is that there's no singular certification that we as an industry can point to. And so, for example, we don't have a red seal that allows our clients to know that our team members have a level of training or certification or qualification that we can assure them with. So for us, the CIMS certification was a starting point for that, and a place for us to build forward to. And again, as Christina and Yanni have mentioned, what we were really hoping to get from it and what it has delivered for us is an ability to build out platforms that allow us to deliver consistent health and safety, consistent supply chain management, as well as consistent operational outcomes. And then sort of finally and more recently, I think one of the sort of add-on benefits we've seen from it is it also has allowed us to start to build out ESG programming as a result of the way it's built out itself over the years, and just so the changes we've seen through the program, as well as our ability to be a little bit more effective in communicating across the organization, across Canada.
Cool. Great. Thanks, Rob. So now, the decision's been made. You're at that point where you're just getting underway. So there's a big process, I guess, that you're looking, to the future for us to what's going to be involved. So I wonder if you could share with our listeners, what that actual process was like, what was involved, was it difficult? How long did it take you? And did you learn anything about your current business model at that time that kind of surprised you as a result of going through the process to become CIMS certified? I'm going to ask Yanni if you would start with your response to this.
Yeah, so even to like your last question, and I think I mentioned before, when we first had engaged with ISSA to set it up and start that kind of audit process, from having nothing to putting it all together and getting our audit completed was about 6 months for us. And that was starting from scratch, and back in the day, we're talking 2009. We're not as advanced as we were, but as we are now, as we were then. So a lot of it did involve, a lot of times we have a lot of crystallized knowledge amongst everyone in our workforce, and putting it on paper sometimes is the thing that takes the longest, right? You can have some really good practices, in Ontario especially. We look at health and safety for employees, and there's a lot of standards you have to meet to be a very compliant company. So it's very much putting those things onto paper to ensure that you can prove it. So from the start of it, it seems daunting because there's a lot of checks, a lot of mays, shalls, musts that you have to check off. But when you start to go through it and you kind of just by step, some of those are just one sentence just saying yes, we do this, and then the next thing is just a paragraph describing the steps you take. So it can feel daunting if it's left to one person. If you have the right people in place with the right expertise on your team, they can make it, many things, right? You can make it go really quick. Now, when we do our audit every year, we give ourselves about a 4-month line of, okay, let's sit down, give ourselves, when is the audit going to be occurring? Is everything that we have, in current compliance? Have have laws changed? We update those every year, but do we update it in our CIMS standard? We go through all those, we check them off, and then that leaves us with, should we improve upon this? Should we edit this? Or is something missing here now that's new that we need to comply with? So we go through those steps to give us plenty of time, because you don't want to be rushing it at the last minute. It's not a standard that's just to check the box. It's actually your practices as a company. So much like Robert said with ESG, especially now, we get a lot of questions about that when it comes to RFPs or different opportunities. And, a lot of that is laid out in the CIMS standard that oftentimes we find it's just kind of cut and paste to give those answers to a client because we've already been practicing it. So something that we were kind of surprised to see when we first started was, back in the day, the big thing was green cleaning, right? What are you doing? Are you laundering? Are you using, more green seal or eco logo style product? Those were kind of the new trend at the time. And we're already at that point. So it was kind of seeing that you're being progressive, that you're putting things in place that are, elevating the industry standards, which is nice to see. And other things you see are kind of your blind spots. You don't think about those things from time to time. You might think, let me make sure that gets done, but you don't see how kind of fundamental it is as a base to building a very strong operational background and health and safety background for your company.
Great. Thanks, Yanni. So, Rob, I'll ask you to go next. And again, from the Be Clean perspective, what was the process like, and was it difficult? How long did it take? And were there any surprises, in your current business model that going through the process uncovered for you?
Yeah, you touched on it really well. I think you referred to it as crystallized knowledge. I think, so one of the surprises, which probably shouldn't be a surprise to anyone on this call, is that by and large, our team members sort of all across Canada are doing things, really, really amazing things that were sort of made us a little bit more aware of them going through the audit process. So 2 years ago was our last external audit with ISSA. I got to take part in actual physical audits of buildings. So the amount of work that our health and safety teams in particular are doing in buildings on the ground, actually working with team members, was astounding. So the amount of time that's put into it. And again, this all ties in very nicely with a number of other programs which have come along since then. But nonetheless, the amount of time that has been required on the ground, face to face with team members in facilities is really quite remarkable. And the amount of the degree to which the program has been adopted is really astounding. So again, sort of a huge credit to the people that actually make the program work for us. Yanni also touched on it as well, sort of probably around the time that all of us got involved in this, from 2007 to 2016. A big focus for a lot of clients was perhaps LEED certifications, EBOM certifications. This CIMS, in particular the GB certification, the Green Building certification, really helped us to be able to, as Yanni said, just reference what we already have done within the CIMS program to support our clients actually getting points toward their EBOM certifications. So that had been particularly valuable. And again, as the program's evolved, that type of sentiment, that type of ability for us to have knowledge at our fingertips has really expanded. So it's been like a great platform for us to build off of in a number of ways within the business.
Great. Thanks, Rob. And Christina, could you speak to the same points from Scandinavian's perspective, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Yanni mentioned the word daunting, and I think that's where we were seeing things at first glance as well when we received the CIMS standard and looked at the long list. But I will say, with a lot of planning and first assessing what we already have in place, you're left with a shorter list, and that makes it a lot less daunting. So rather than seeing it as a huge bite or big chunk to bite off, you're going to look at those smaller chunks where you might see your gaps. But we knew that we had a lot of processes that just might have not been documented formally. And so we saw this as a really practical exercise to document what we do and look at that one more time and say, is there somewhere we can improve and be more efficient or be more thorough in this process? And so we found that to be really practical and beneficial for our company too. So as we got traction and started to enjoy the process, it was really motivating for us too. We wanted to continue on and just be a progressive organization, one that provides the very best service, one that has a really strong safety culture. And so it was an enjoyable process, although challenging, like we said. What was really important was that we had a strong team of subject matter experts. I think both Rob and Yanni had mentioned this too, is you need to have your experts in each department or each area to provide their input and know that this is a team effort and a group effort. So I wouldn't say that it was overly difficult overall, but it did make us think and it challenged us. How can we be more efficient? What experiences can we bring to the table? And then be committed to just following through. So not just writing it on paper, but actually implementing and communicating those changes at the site level. And that's what I really like too about the audit, is that they go right on site and see that those processes are being implemented, and just the tremendous amount of work that is done on sites and the customer service that they provide. It was a well-rounded audit. So I have had the pleasure of being a part of a number of them. And as a health and safety team member at Scandinavian, I do have the honor of just going out to our sites on a frequent basis. So I know what that looks like. And I try to, or we as leaders at Scandinavian, we try to implement things that will work at the site level, that will be functional and move us forward as an organization too.
Great. Thanks, Christina. So earlier in the conversation, I asked each of you how long or when you actually were CIMS certified. And so, for Impact, it's been 15 years, Yanni, and Rob at Be Clean, it's been 17 years. And a little more recently, Christina at Scandinavian, it's been 8 years. So I guess we're at the point now where, you've been certified for some time, and, it becomes kind of the $64,000 question now. And that question kind of goes along the lines of, was it worth it? And has your business changed for the better? And, in essence, what have you gotten from your investment in both time and money? And if possible, in your kind of comments, could you maybe point out a few examples of where, being CIMS certified has really kind of benefited your organization in terms of a return on investment? And so I'd like you to comment with that in mind. And Christina, I'll ask you to start off and address those questions, please.
Absolutely. So CIMS helps Scandinavian to grow and create new client relationships. That was really one of our main goals when we took on the certification, and we wanted to diversify in the industry. So I can say that's certainly been a realization as the organization has grown tremendously over the last few years. And otherwise, it's also elevated our safety culture. It's allowed us to be consistent. As you all know, the occupational health and safety legislation is provincial. And so coming up with a program that works for all of our provinces and meets or exceeds legislation was really important to us. So it helped us to build that safety culture in a way that's positive and that's being actually followed at the site level. It also helped us with our communications. We were wanting to be more strategic that way at implementing these changes and ensuring that they're followed at all levels of the organization. So being strategic was very important to the organization to move us forward and be able to handle the growth that we've been realizing lately. And then aligned our operations nationwide. As I mentioned, that was really key too, is that we have leadership now that oversee the whole organization, others that oversee, about half the nation. And so there's consistency now across the board, which is really great to see. Furthermore, it brought our teams together so that we can be more streamlined. Doing that review and revision of our company policies and processes was a great exercise, as we are all now more aligned and more efficient that way. And CIMS, as you know, is highly recognized in our industry, and it's an asset when working with our clients. I think it gives them that confidence and reassurance that they've got a building contractor that follows at least a minimum standard, which is a high standard with CIMS. They have some confidence knowing that the organization has sound processes, a strong health and safety program, and going to provide the best customer service too.
Great. Thanks, Christina. Yanni, could you go next, please?
Sure. So for us, I think we always base it down to that CIMS is kind of the fundamentals, right? These are like the practices that we always want to have in place, and much like Robert and Christina have mentioned, it's help us expand across Canada and provide those same sound guidelines wherever we start new business, and it gives kind of a universal language to speak to, because you're going to be practicing the same things regardless of where you go, as long as they're not going against any type of rules, regulations, or laws. But these standards are kind of holding yourself not only to the bare minimum, but raising your floor so that your quality and expertise are that much higher than someone who might not have these standards in place. Just like Robert had mentioned, even with LEED, the EBOM, the existing buildings operation maintenance, you check almost all the boxes in terms of the green cleaning category for them. For BOMA, same thing. For BOMA Best, you're already meeting those requirements for a building. So those are national practices, though they're also in the States as well, that you're already hitting those fundamentals as your base as a company. So you don't even have to be CIMS or CIMS GB with honors in order to already be meeting a lot of those requirements that these other standards are looking for in a cleaning company, where you're just one small piece of the puzzle, but your whole company is, well above that. So, like I said, it's just the fundamentals. When someone comes into our company, they're able to take that, we say binder off the shelf, but now it's all digital. But back in the day, it was a nice three binders along the shelf. You could take that down, you could go through it and basically get to what is kind of impact and how we operate, and it's all that distilled information down to a very succinct format, where it makes sure that we're always consistent, we're always practicing the same thing, that we're communicating the same way, whether it's internally or externally, and our employees, our management, and our clients understand what our practices are.
Right. So Yanni, would you say your organization at Impact is a better company as a result of being CIMS certified?
Absolutely, and I think it just speaks as well to like I said, giving that universal language that everyone's going to speak. Because at times before we really got into CIMS and made it kind of across the board for our company, we still even deal with multiple different scopes at buildings, multiple different requirements for health and safety at buildings, and we kind of look at it as what's the most difficult one we have in place to kind of clear that bar, and let's make that kind of our standard. And when you look at CIMS, it's almost, that's already the practice. You're already elevating yourself above what's just required. You're kind of giving yourself that extra leg up of attention to what you're doing for your health and safety, the attention to what you're putting into your cleaning operations, the attention to what you're putting into your management. And it's kind of a relief when you look, we just got speaking to ESG, we just got an ESG questionnaire and survey, and it was 84 questions. Some of them were just check off yes, no. Other ones, give your background information. Well, like I said, we were going through our CIMS kind of standard or all our answers and going, 84, we've already checked off 60 of them without really having to think twice about it, because it's all there. So it was, and those are things they look at as, what somewhat more exceptional companies achieve, right? You could say no to it, it's not a problem, but you're kind of going above and beyond when you hit the yes on those questions. So we were kind of it's just elevated us to a better platform to help us grow, to help us practice, for better results.
Thanks, Yanni. Rob, would you please give us your comments on that question?
Yeah, so just to sort of take a step back too, although our path to initially attaining the CIMS certification is a little bit different, it's absolutely true that we have seen an increase in client engagement in the usage of CIMS as perhaps a pre-qualification requirement, or alternatively just something to point to external. And I think that has been really valuable for us. I think for the industry more generally. Again, if we sort of reflect back to during the pandemic, 3 or 4 years ago now, we were always, all of us, trying to seek external sources to point to validate our decisions with respect to disinfection or workload. We would often point to the CDC or the Public Health Authority of Canada. Similarly to that, CIMS has represented that for us, and we refer to CIMS regularly as a way that a client or an outside body can make some sort of an assessment of our organization in relation to our peers, that we have a management standard in place to actually run the business. We've often drawn parallels between it and ISO as a certification methodology for management standard. And in fact, similarly, we have, much like Yanni and Christina referred to as well, we have ISO operating principles in some of our regions within Canada. And again, like Yanni said, much of the same methodologies and much of the same response is required of those standards of ISO as it is for CIMS. So it's been a really valuable bootstrapping tool for us, as we talked about a little bit earlier on, to move into other initiatives within the organization. It's been a really effective organizational tool for us. And again, as it's grown over the last number of years, we've been really pleased with what our teams have been able to deliver on the program and how the program has supported us in the business.
Thanks, Rob. So we've got one more question for our guest. And for someone out there that is thinking about or considering CIMS certification, I'd like to ask you to maybe share some thoughts around, what you would offer in terms of advice, I think, for them in their consideration towards the CIMS standard, having been through the whole process and now having, in a couple of cases, quite a few years experience with the standard itself. So I'd like to ask Rob, you're on the screen right now, if you would kind of offer some of that advice to any of our listeners.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the answer is kind of, it depends. If you're considering it in a scope that is relatively concise, so for example, to one city or one region or one province, maybe, I think you probably want to be have that really focused in on one individual who can own it. If you're a little bit more national in scope in terms of approaching your first certification, I think you need to think about building out a team that can represent regions, because it is really difficult to, again, bootstrap across the country in the absence of having identified candidates to do that, in particular with auditing taking place in multiple provinces. But I think the most important thing is in both cases, is to have a single point of contact who owns it. And one of the things that I think we can all probably comment on is this is one of the things that gets added to many people's desks. So having someone who can commit a little bit more time than, a 10% project is really important, because this takes a lot of work. And it takes a lot of communication out to the organization to make sure that people actually are aware of what's happening with CIMS, what the implications are to our operation, and how we have to modify our behavior in order to be a CIMS contractor. Again, we've been in it for a long time, and I think that's not necessarily a reflection that we beat Impact or Scandinavian to it, but that it's taken a lot of time for us to continue to evolve our own behaviors within the organization and sort of adapt to the CIMS programming. And as we talked about, to allow us to really evolve as an organization and implement more and more consistent practices across all the parts of our business.
Great advice. Thanks, Rob. Yanni, could you give us your advice, please?
Yeah, I think people to recognize it's very much as a certification, it's very much about your business practices. So it's a good evaluation tool. Like you can look at the template of what you go through to get that certification and already start to mentally check off: do I do this? Do we do this? Have we thought about this? How would I answer this question? And really take a look at your organization and your business. And like Robert said, having one person who really will champion it, if you're looking more localized, if you're just one single building and you're an organization at one location who's looking for it, versus a service contractor who might be in multiple areas, seeing what you do and what practices you have in place, and give yourself that self audit first. It really is just a good tool to look at, like, are you doing the best practices that you think are in place, and do you think it would pass the bar to get you that certification? So it's not just let's make sure we check this off, show the logo on our website, and then tell our clients we have it. It really is your fundamental day-to-day kind of practices that you're putting down on paper to prove it. It's not just, you can't just say you do it and then have it done. You can't just have one person go through, one of the expert certifications and say, our organization has it. it's about putting the practices in place and following through with them, because you do have auditors come in, they walk through your sites, they check your operations in the field, they come into your office, you have to be an open book, show them what they need to see to really prove that you're doing it. And that's also a lot of times what your clients are going to ask you to do. So if you're ready to take those steps, it's very easy, and it helps you just improve upon practices, improve on yourself and what you're trying to put out there, and really making sure you work as a team to put it together. Because if you put one person in place to try do all this, you might be a small organization capable of doing that, but once you start getting to a little bit of a larger footprint, if you're not just one building or one location, you're going to need the help, and you're gonna want to make sure that everyone on your team understands what this is and what the practice is, and that what you're trying to put in place.
Great. Thanks, Yanni. Christina, what would your advice be?
I would mimic both of their advice. I think that I can relate on a lot of those points that they said, which was particularly having one person champion the initiative is a great idea, but having representatives across the country is really key. As we know, there's leadership in each region that can help to implement and communicate. And having that strong communication was another really key piece of advice that I just wanted to also concur with. But I also wanted to say that even really well-established organizations have room for improvement. And for us, CIMS was providing us with a standard to work towards. So it's a great thing to take on for organizations who want to be progressive and strategic, and they're willing to invest in themselves to develop internally. So Scandinavian, we said that we provide excellent customer service, but we always know that we have room to grow, just like every organization does. So to me, it's a really important step early in the process to pre-plan, establish your strong team, and then take that time necessary to identify your gaps and start working towards closing those areas that require the most improvement first. And challenge is good. Having a vision of what you want the organization to achieve is wonderful. And then keep your eye on that as you work through it. It's going to keep you motivated and trucking along. And I just encourage other organizations to do the same.
Great. Thanks, Christina. So, Tanya, it looks like we've got some time. Are there any questions that our guests have sent in that we could pose to our... So there are no questions? Is that what you're saying?
There is no questions, but I do have a question. With regards to the 2-year recertification process, does that offer you as a business to look at a different aspect of your business or maybe improve on something? How does that work with each of your companies as you've been doing this for a long time? Christina, maybe you could start.
I think the 2-year cycle is appropriate in that you don't feel like you're always going through an audit.
Yeah.
You have time to kind of see the operations as time goes on, that if they're implementing it consistently, what's working and what isn't. And then you have time to jump back into sort of audit prep mode to look at, okay, things that we thought would work, maybe they aren't as practical, or there's challenges. And then you can kind of start diving into those again. But then at least you're not always feeling like you're prepping for the CIMS audit.
Wow, thank you. How about you, Yanni?
So for us, I think even sometimes we wish, it would be like 3 years, just because, when you got a lot going on and the time comes around, you were like, oh, maybe a little bit more time, but then it's not when you've done it a few times, it's just more so making sure that you're holding yourself accountable, that you actually are updating your practices too on paper as much as you have updated them, in the field. Especially, going through COVID as everyone did, we hit our audit right before, right after. So what a difference 2 years makes there, right? 2019, we're finalizing it. 2020, 2021, we're reviewing it. So in those 2 years, big fundamental changes happened. So if it was 1 year, we would be we'd be going through a lot every time, but the 2 years really does give you time to sit, to think, to contemplate, and to really put it into place, any changes that you make, and to review yourself periodically. Because some people, things might not change year to year, but every 2 years, every 4 years, you're going to find bigger differences. And we like to even look back previously what our answers were, and we realize, things haven't dropped off; they've only gotten built up. So you can always take the time and reflect and see what has changed and why has it changed.
Fair enough. Thank you. Robert?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with both Christina and Yanni. And I think my answer would be somewhere in the middle too. Like 2 and 3 years would both be nice audit timeframes. 2 kind of keeps you a little bit feet to the fire a little bit more, because 2 years goes awfully quickly. But certainly having the frequency, and pretty regularly scheduled audit coming up on us is actually important. So for example, coming out of our last audit, one of the discrepancies identified was that we basically have inconsistent equipment auditing across Canada. Equipment inspection. So that's a place for us to improve. And that was a really valuable insight for us to take away from the auditors. Gives us time to actually do something about it, because again, whether you're sort of talking about within a city or a province or across the country, that actually takes a lot of time. And by and large, all the work is getting done by, again, team members that are doing phenomenal work. Methodologies are just inconsistent sometimes. So that's sort of an area for us to allow us ourselves to try to improve by becoming more consistent. So it's a good time frame.
Awesome. Thank you. We do have a question. Thank you, Terry. So it sounds like everyone did the certification for many reasons and did not consider the cost or revenue benefit, which this question comes up often. Did anyone measure the cost or the benefit?
I'll take that initially. I think, like anything else, every certification has a cost to it. And so certainly at times we have to consider whether that does have a benefit to us. But like we talked about a little bit earlier, the one real standout value that CIMS offers to us is that it's specific to our industry. So while we can, perhaps look at ISO, it's a little bit more generic, and it is very valuable as well. But it doesn't draw upon the themes that are really consistent within our business. So that has been the sort of real, I guess, the thumb on the scale that really benefits the CIMS certification is that it is really specific to the janitorial industry, whether you're a contractor or alternatively an in-house service provider.
And I'll even speak to that too. If you look at the opportunity cost, a lot of public RFPs that go out require a standard designation. If it's going to be an ISO, if it's going to be a CIMS, if you don't have those in place, oftentimes you're going to be marked lower. You're not going to be able to participate. So you're leaving opportunities on the table by not benchmarking yourself to an industry standard. And like Robert said, it's industry specific, so it really does account for what practices and what operations you have rather than a more generic like ISO.
Thank you. Christina?
Yeah, I would agree with both of their comments as well. And I think the return on investment grows over time, actually, because sometimes you land a contract partly due to the fact that you have that CIMS standard. Especially if you're a green building, let's say that's qualified you to have a certain client that you're eligible to work with, and then that return on investment grows over time because that contract may be a number of years long, and it just continues to grow that way too.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, it doesn't appear that we have any further questions. So with that said, I'd like to thank you again, Ken, for moderating. Yanni, Rob, Christina, thank you for the valuable information that you shared with us today. And I'd like to thank everybody else who's attending today for their time. If you would like additional information on the CIMS standard, I have included links in the chat for our French and English speaking audience, or you can email me directly and I will forward you to the proper contact person. Also, in closing, if you haven't already done so, the ISSA Hygeia Networking and Leadership Conference is coming to Canada for the first time to Mississauga on April 25th. And that information is also available on our website. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a great day and a wonderful International Cleaning Week. And I hope you'll be able to join us again on April 24th for the next episode of ISSA Canada's Coffee Talk Forum. Thank you.